The forest was silent, not the kind of silence that comes from peace but the kind that follows violence. The Hürtgen Forest, November 1944. Dawn had not yet broken but something had already ended. In the pale fog that clung to the skeletal trees there were bodies, 27 of them, all German, all arranged in a pattern that military investigators would later refuse to explain in their official reports. They had not been killed by artillery. They had not been killed by grenades. They had been killed by bullets, single shots, each one precise, each one fatal, and according to the evidence collected at the scene, all of them had been fired from the same rifle, one soldier, 27 dead men. The weapon was found nearby, still warm, the barrel scorched from repeated fire, but the soldier who had fired it was gone. He had walked away from the scene, leaving only his bootprints in the mud and a trail of spent shell casings that stretched through the trees like breadcrumbs in a nightmare. This was not a battle. This was something else, something the army did not want to name. Welcome to this channel. Today we step into a case that is not just difficult to understand, it reshapes the meaning of fear itself. If you're still listening, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to this channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? His name was Private First Class Samuel Wicker, 23 years old, born in rural Tennessee. Before the war he had worked in his father's lumber mill. He was quiet, his commanding officer would later say, the kind of man who kept to himself, who followed orders without question, who did not stand out. But in the weeks leading up to November 1944 something had changed. Other soldiers in his unit began to notice. Wicker had stopped sleeping. He would sit awake through the night, his rifle across his lap, staring into the darkness beyond the foxholes. When spoken to, he would not respond. When asked if he was all right, he would turn his head slowly, as if hearing a voice from very far away, and then nod once. That was all. One soldier, Corporal Daniel Reese, wrote in a letter to his wife dated October 29, 1944, "There's a man in our company who doesn't speak anymore. He just watches. I don't know what he's watching for, but I think he's waiting for something. I think we all are." The Hürtgen Forest was a place where men went to disappear. It was a dense, dark sprawl of woodland along the German-Belgian border, and by the autumn of 1944 it had become one of the bloodiest theaters of the entire war. The trees were so thick that even at midday the forest floor was submerged in shadow. Artillery could not penetrate the canopy. Air support was useless. Soldiers fought in near-total darkness, often unable to see more than a few feet ahead. The cold was constant. The mud was endless, and the Germans, dug into bunkers and fortified positions, knew every inch of the terrain. For the Americans it was a slow, grinding nightmare. Men died in the Hürtgen not from grand charges or heroic last stands, but from snipers from mines, from the sheer crushing weight of fear that came from being hunted in a forest where every tree could hide death. By November entire companies had been decimated. Soldiers who survived spoke of hearing voices in the trees, of seeing movement where there was none, of the feeling that the forest itself was alive and that it was watching them. Samuel Wicker's unit, Company B of the 28th Infantry Division, had been stationed in the Hürtgen for 11 days when the incident occurred. They were tasked with holding a narrow ridge overlooking a German supply route. It was a defensive position intended to delay enemy reinforcements. But on the night of November 16, 1944, a German patrol was sent to probe the American lines, 27 men. They moved through the forest in silence, using the fog and the darkness as cover. They were experienced soldiers, veterans of the Eastern Front, men who had survived Stalingrad and Kursk. They knew how to kill without being seen. They knew how to move without being heard, but they did not know about Samuel Wicker. The patrol entered the American perimeter just after midnight. There were no alarms, no shots fired. The Germans moved through the trees like ghosts, slipping past the outer sentries without detection. They were within 50 yards of the American foxholes when the first shot was fired. A single crack, sharp and clean, cutting through the silence. One of the German soldiers dropped. The others scattered, diving for cover, searching for the shooter. But before they could locate him, another shot rang out. Then another. Each shot was spaced exactly 3 seconds apart. Each shot found its target. The Germans tried to retreat, but they were too far inside the perimeter. They tried to advance, but they could not see their attacker. They fired blindly into the darkness, their muzzle flashes giving away their positions. And with every flash another shot would answer. Another body would fall. It lasted less than 10 minutes. By the time the fog lifted, all 27 members of the German patrol were dead. When the rest of Company B reached the site at dawn, they found Samuel Wicker standing in the center of the carnage. His rifle was still smoking, his hands were steady, his face was blank. When his commanding officer, Lieutenant Howard Graves, asked him what had happened, Wicker did not answer. He simply handed over his rifle and walked back toward the American lines. He did not speak for the next 3 days. The bodies were counted. The shell casings were collected. A preliminary investigation was conducted by the battalion's intelligence officer, Captain Andrew Fulmer. His report, filed on November 19, 1944, contains the following line: "The evidence suggests that all casualties were inflicted by a single shooter using a standard-issue M1 Garand rifle. The precision and timing of the shots indicate an extremely high level of skill, but also raise questions about the psychological state of the shooter. Recommend immediate psychiatric evaluation." If you're still listening, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to this channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? But the psychiatric evaluation never took place. Instead, Samuel Wicker was quietly removed from active duty and transferred to a re-echelon unit in France. No charges were filed, no commendation was issued. The incident was classified and all records related to it were sealed. The official explanation given to the rest of Company B was that Wicker had been reassigned due to combat fatigue. But the soldiers who had been there that night knew better. Corporal Reese, in a letter dated November 22, 1944, wrote, "They took him away. They said he was sick. But I saw his eyes when they let him out. He wasn't sick. He was awake, more awake than any of us." And that's what scared them. The story should have ended there. A single soldier, pushed beyond his limits by the horrors of war, had snapped and killed an entire enemy patrol with mechanical precision. It was tragic perhaps, but not unusual. The Hürtgen Forest was full of such stories. Men who had seen too much, men who had done too much, men who could no longer tell the difference between survival and madness. But in the weeks following the incident, other reports began to surface. Reports that had been buried, dismissed, or ignored. On November 3, 1944, a German observation post in the southern Hürtgen had been found abandoned. All 6 soldiers stationed there were dead. Autopsies revealed that each had been killed by a single rifle shot to the head. The shots had been fired from a distance of approximately 200 yards. No American units had been operating in that area. On November 9, 1944, a supply convoy escorting ammunition to the front lines had been ambushed. 12 German soldiers were killed, all of them by rifle fire, all of them by single, precise shots. The convoy's American escorts reported that they had not fired a single round. They claimed the shooting had come from the forest itself, from a location they could not identify. And then there were the letters, dozens of them sent home by soldiers serving in the Hürtgen during October and November of 1944. Most of them were never published. Most of them were intercepted by military censors and marked as classified, but a few slipped through. Private James Holt, writing to his brother on November 5, 1944, "There's someone in the woods. We don't know who he is. The Germans are afraid of him. We are too." Sergeant William Cross, writing to his mother on November 13, 1944, "The men say there's a ghost in the forest. They say he hunts at night. They say he never misses." And Private Eugene Lassiter, in a letter that was never sent, found among his personal effects after he was killed by shrapnel on November 20, 1944, "I saw him yesterday, just for a second. He was standing in the trees watching us. He had a rifle. I think he was deciding whether to shoot. I don't know why he didn't." The Allied command was aware of these reports. Internal memos from the 28th Infantry Division's headquarters reveal that by mid-November, there was growing concern about what was being described as unauthorized sniper activity within the Hürtgen. On November 18, 1944, Major General Norman Cota, commander of the 28th Division, issued a confidential order to all subordinate units. All personnel are reminded that engagement with enemy forces must follow established rules of engagement. Any soldier found operating independently or outside the chain of command will be subject to court-martial. Reports of rogue or vigilante actions are to be immediately forwarded to division headquarters. But the order was never enforced, because by the time it was issued, Samuel Wicker was already gone. He had been transferred out of the combat zone, placed in a holding facility near Paris, and scheduled for transport back to the United States. The official records state that he was suffering from acute combat stress and required extended psychiatric treatment. But there is another document buried in the National Archives that tells a different story. It is a handwritten note, unsigned, dated November 21, 1944. It reads, "Wicker is not insane, he is operational, but he cannot be controlled. Recommend permanent removal from theater." If you're still listening, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to this channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? In December 1944, Samuel Wicker was admitted to a military psychiatric hospital in upstate New York. He remained there for 6 months. During that time, he underwent extensive interviews and psychological evaluations. The transcripts of those sessions are still partially classified, but portions were declassified in 1998. In one session, dated January 14, 1945, Wicker was asked to describe the events of November 16, 1944. His response is chilling in its simplicity. "I saw them coming, I knew what they were going to do, so I stopped them." When asked how he was able to kill 27 men in such a short period of time, Wicker's answer was even more unsettling. "I didn't think about it, I just did what needed to be done. One shot at a time, that's all it takes." One shot. The interviewing psychiatrist, Dr. Leonard Marsh, wrote in his notes, "Subject displays no signs of remorse, guilt, or emotional distress related to the incident. His affect is flat. His responses are matter-of-fact. He describes the killings with the same tone one might use to describe chopping wood or repairing a fence. There is no indication that he understands the moral or ethical implications of his actions. Or perhaps more disturbingly, he understands them perfectly and has simply chosen not to care." Dr. Marsh recommended that Wicker be discharged from the Army on medical grounds and prohibited from possessing firearms. His recommendation was accepted. In June 1945, Samuel Wicker was honorably discharged and sent home to Tennessee. He lived quietly for the rest of his life. He returned to his father's lumber mill. He married in 1947. He had 3 children. He attended church on Sundays. He never spoke about the war. His family would later say that he was a kind man, a gentle man, a man who never raised his voice. But there was one detail that his wife mentioned in an interview conducted in 1982, long after Wicker's death. She said that he kept his old rifle in the attic. The same M1 Garand he had carried in the Hürtgen, and on certain nights she would wake to find him gone from their bed. She would walk through the house and find him sitting in the dark in the living room with the rifle across his lap, just sitting, just watching. When she asked him what he was doing, he would say, "Listening." And when she asked what he was listening for, he would not answer. The German records tell a different part of the story. After the war, Allied intelligence teams began sifting through captured German military documents, trying to piece together the enemy's perspective on key battles and operations. Among those documents was a classified report filed by the German 275th Infantry Division, which had been operating in the Hürtgen Forest during the autumn of 1944. The report, dated November 20, 1944, describes a series of unexplained casualties among German reconnaissance and patrol units. The language is clinical, but the fear is unmistakable. Patrols operating in Sector 7 have sustained disproportionate losses over the past 3 weeks. Casualties consistently exhibit single gunshot wounds to the head or chest, suggesting the presence of an enemy sniper of exceptional skill. Attempts to locate and neutralize this individual have failed. Morale among forward units is declining. Soldiers report feeling as though they are being hunted. There is another document, this one from the personal diary of a German officer, Oberleutnant Hans Fischer, who served in the Hürtgen during November 1944. His entry from November 17, 1944 reads, "Last night we sent a patrol to probe the American lines. None of them returned. This morning we found them, all dead, all shot. The Americans say they do not know who did it. I believe them. There is something in these woods. Something that kills without mercy and without hesitation. My men are beginning to talk about it. They call him Der Geist, the ghost. I do not believe in ghosts, but I believe in what I have seen." If you're still listening, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to this channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? The question that haunts this case is not whether Samuel Wicker killed 27 German soldiers in a single night. The evidence for that is overwhelming. The question is why he was allowed to walk away, why he was never court-martialed, why his actions were covered up, sealed away, hidden from history. The answer lies in the nature of war itself. The Hürtgen Forest was a place where the normal rules did not apply. It was a place where survival depended on instinct, on the ability to kill before being killed. Samuel Wicker had crossed a line, but in the eyes of the military, he had crossed it in service of the mission. He had stopped a German patrol. He had protected his unit. He had done his job. The fact that he had done it with a cold, inhuman efficiency was disturbing, yes, but it was also effective. And in war, effectiveness is often valued more than morality. But there is another theory, one that is whispered among military historians and veterans who served in the Hürtgen. This theory suggests that Samuel Wicker was not an anomaly, that he was not the only one, that there were others like him scattered throughout the forest, soldiers who had been pushed so far beyond the limits of human endurance that they had stopped being soldiers and become something else, something colder, something more dangerous. There are reports, unverified but persistent, of other incidents during the Hürtgen campaign. German patrols that vanished without a trace. Entire squads found dead, killed with surgical precision with no evidence of who had done it. These reports were never investigated. They were dismissed as enemy propaganda or as the product of combat stress and exhaustion. But the pattern is there if you know where to look. In 1979, a journalist named Catherine Merrill attempted to investigate the Samuel Wicker case for a book she was writing about the Hürtgen Forest. She tracked down several veterans who had served in Company B during November 1944. Most of them refused to speak to her, but one man, Corporal Daniel Reese, agreed to an interview. He was 71 years old at the time, living in a small town in Pennsylvania. When Merrill asked him about Samuel Wicker, Reese was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I don't think Sam was crazy. I think he just figured it out before the rest of us. He figured out that the only way to survive was to become the thing we were all afraid of. He became the hunter instead of the hunted, and once you make that choice you can't go back." Merrill asked him if he thought Wicker had enjoyed killing those men. Reese shook his head. "No, I don't think he felt anything at all. That's what made him dangerous, that's what made him perfect." Samuel Wicker died in 1971 at the age of 50. The cause of death was a heart attack. He was buried in a small cemetery in Tennessee with full military honors. His gravestone lists his rank and his service dates, but it says nothing about the Hürtgen Forest. It says nothing about the 27 men he killed. His family scattered after his death. His children moved away. His wife lived for another decade, but she rarely spoke about him. When she did, she would say only that he had been a good husband, a good father, and a man who had seen too much. She never mentioned the rifle in the attic. She never mentioned the nights he spent sitting in the dark. If you're still listening, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to this channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? The final piece of this story comes from a letter that was found among Samuel Wicker's personal effects after his death. It was never sent. It was addressed to Lieutenant Howard Graves, his commanding officer in the Hürtgen. The letter is undated, but handwriting analysis suggests it was written sometime in the 1960s. It reads, "Sir, I know you probably don't remember me. I was just another soldier in your company, but I need you to know that I did what I had to do that night. I didn't have a choice. They were coming for us, and if I hadn't stopped them, we would all be dead. I know what the reports say, I know what people think, but I wasn't crazy. I was just doing my job. The problem is I can't stop. Even now, 20 years later, I still see them in the trees, I still hear them moving, and I still feel the weight of the rifle in my hands. I don't know if that makes me a good soldier or a bad man, maybe it makes me both." The letter ends there. It was never sent. Lieutenant Graves died in 1963, long before the letter was written. But the fact that Wicker wrote it at all suggests that he was not as emotionless as the psychiatric reports claimed. He was haunted, not by guilt perhaps, but by the knowledge of what he had become. By the understanding that once a man learns to kill with such precision, such detachment, he can never fully return to the world of the living. The military files on Samuel Wicker remain partially classified. The official explanation is that they contain sensitive information related to wartime operations and intelligence methods, but researchers who have attempted to access these files have been met with resistance. Requests under the Freedom of Information Act have been denied or heavily redacted. The few documents that have been released are incomplete, with entire pages missing or blacked out. This has led to speculation that there is more to the story, that there are details the government does not want to be made public. Some believe that Wicker was part of a classified program, a psychological experiment designed to create the perfect soldier. Others believe that his case was suppressed because it revealed uncomfortable truths about the nature of war and the men who fight in it. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. Samuel Wicker was not a monster. He was not a hero. He was a man who was placed in an impossible situation and who responded in the only way he knew how. He became a machine. He became efficient. He became exactly what war demanded of him, and when the war was over, he tried to go back to being human. But the machine was still there inside him, waiting, watching, listening. The Hürtgen Forest is quiet now. The trees have grown back. The scars of battle have faded. Tourists walk through the woods unaware of the horrors that took place there. But if you stand in the right spot on a cold November morning and you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The crack of a rifle shot, the sound of a man breathing slowly, steadily as he lines up his next target. And you might wonder just for a moment if Samuel Wicker is still out there, still watching, still waiting. Still doing what needs to be done, one shot at a time.